When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.
Welcome back to Draftvice, everybody. It is I am Walter. We are here, and we're coming up. We're just a little bit over a week from the draft, and I'm still going to be doing prospects, but no prospects today, everybody. We're going to give the prospects a break. We'll say hi to them tomorrow. Today we're doing a look forward. Still, another episode of a look forward. Look forward to a couple of NFL teams. I know free agency's coming, basically gone. We're now at the dregs of free agency. Although there's still players who haven't been signed, important players, pretty players, amazing players who are still out there on the market, so maybe we find them a home. But we're close to the draft. But we could also kind of give a perspective of what some of these teams have done in free agency and how it might affect their draft. So right off the bat, top one is the Seattle Seahawks, who, like, when you look at what they've done in free agency, it doesn't seem like much, but they're usually late bloomers to free agency. Like, if you've noticed this, they usually get guys who are looking for one-year deals at, like, $5 million a year. Like last year, they got the Ezekiel Ansah as a defensive end, and they got him kind of late. I think they got him post-draft. And then they also traded for Jadeveon Clowney right before the season. So they just find ways of finding guys, right? Like they just seem to go ahead and circle up some like new players and build up. They don't panic, is what I'm saying, folks. Seattle and the Patriots, they do not panic. They go, listen, we know what we want to do. They might fire everybody. They might hire brand new people. They might redo the whole room. But they do not panic for some weird reason. Even when they do that, they're not panicking. So Seattle did a lot of – they lost some guys in free agency. Jadeveon Clowney, still a free agent. But let's talk about moves they have made, right? They re-signed Mike Iupati. That was a move that literally happened today, everybody. They signed Philip Dorsett. This was relatively early on in free agency, right? Philip Dorsett, kind of a speed guy, but never really could get open considering he can run a 4.3. But, like, think about it. Now you get to pair him up with Tyler Lockett, right? And DK Metcalf. He's not your number one receiver. He's not your number two receiver. He's like your number three receiver on a small contract. Perfect situation. Good for what they like doing, getting the ball deep downfield, very vertical game for Seattle. I'm kind of liking this move. I like Philip Dorsett. I like the fit in the offense. And, again, it wasn't an expensive move. None of the moves that Seattle does is expensive. So I thought that was a good move. Again, like now you have a bunch of extremely fast receivers that are going to be running deep downfield routes for you. I think that's great for Russell Wilson. Could open up the run game. Now, speaking of the run game, they have two running backs on their roster who are kind of injured, right? Chris Carson, and they said he'll probably be back for week 1. And Rashad Penny's coming off a torn ACL when Rashad Penny was finally starting to show. I feel bad for Rashad Penny. But, yeah, Rashad Penny and Chris Carson aren't that healthy. They didn't sign another running back. I don't think they're looking to be too desperate on that, but it might be one of those things we talk about in the draft. In fact, yesterday we did an episode. We as if there's more people here because of quarantine. I did an episode yesterday, although I've consulted with some of our friends. You remember Shane? I talked to him about some of the prospects, and including some of the ones that I mentioned on yesterday's episode about the running backs. And now and I think there's some running backs that they might find like late day 2 or early day 3 that they might look into as far as potential prospects to fill out their roster, or even like late day 3. They also acquired Quinton Dunbar from the Washington Snyder team for a 5th-round pick. I think that's a pretty good deal. Like, they traded for him. It was basically the same pick they traded for Kyle Allen. They swapped Quinton Dunbar for Kyle Allen. Yeah, I know, right? Like, that sounds like an expense. They flipped basically Quinton Dunbar to Seattle, and that 5th-round pick went to Carolina. So, Redskins got to be the circular wheel in all this. as far as Quentin Dunbar goes, I like Quentin Dunbar. Very good corner. Kind of played a very good role in Washington. In fact, was probably one of their best secondary players in Washington. And it's an interesting fit. He's going to go over to Seattle. Maybe help fill out their defensive back room. I think that was a good move on Seattle's part. That's another thing Seattle does. Is they flip guys, or they start like them and the Patriots. They do the pick swaps. They trade late round picks for guys, and they just find some extra depth at veteran players that maybe hey, okay, this guy might leave in a year or two, but like a 5th round pick, that guy's not going to make the roster anyway. So let's have some reassurance that we're going into next year with maybe a solid player that might not be there the following year. So they also signed a bunch of you could see they were going after the offensive line this year. But they were going after it cheap. They didn't want to overspend on a guy. They know they've got Dwayne Brown on the left side. So what they did is they signed Brendan Shell, formerly of the Jets. They signed Chance Warmack, who spent the year out of the NFL. He's an offensive guard. They went ahead and signed Cedric Ogbuehi, also a former tackle who was on Jacksonville. I mean, I got to tell you, if Doug Marrone don't like you, not a lot of coaches are going to like you. But, Cedric Ogbuehi, maybe he develops a little bit more. Can take some years to go ahead and develop as a tackle in the NFL. We saw it with Greg Robinson, and then hopefully he doesn't have the ancillary career that Greg Robinson had, right? So I'm not anti Ogbuehi as a prospective signing. Brendan Shell, also a tackle from the Jets I mentioned. They got to reunite with one of their lost loves. They got Bruce Irvin back, defensive rusher and / linebacker hybrid. Usually played Sam, and then will go ahead and kick to defensive end on rush downs. So they get him back. He was in Carolina for a little bit. Now he's in Seattle again. Back to the beginning, I guess. They re-signed Luke Wilson. Owen Wilson's brother, who knew he was playing in the NFL. But they got him in. Maybe he'll take a break from the acting career. I'm sure they get that joke a lot. And so Luke Wilson's now is continuing his career with the Seahawks, tight end. And you probably see him every once, a game or two, where you're like, oh, I forgot that guy was in the NFL, because they're always looking for a guy who's better than Luke Wilson. We're always looking for a guy who's better than Luke Wilson. His name is Owen. Anyway, and then they re-signed, the real big signing, the big re-signing for them was Jaron Reed, D-tackle, who actually spent quite a few games suspended this year for PEDs. So I'm a little shocked that they were willing to give him a big deal. But hey, you know what? If you're willing to take the risk, he's willing. They put some out clauses in there for voiding of guarantees if he goes ahead and gets suspended again. Probably not a bad deal. Really good run stopper for him, really good D tackle. It was probably not the worst idea in the world to get him back in the room. So Seattle's one of those teams that it's weird. There's some teams that you look at the players around them and you get excited, right? The only guy who gets you really excited about Seattle is maybe DK Metcalf and Russell Wilson on the offensive side. And the defensive side, you're kind of like, how does this work? There's super glue. They just find guys that fit the system. They tweak it a bit. They go ahead and add some things. They use a little bit of their extra sauce. They even released a couple of guys too. We're gonna get into the releases as well when we get to the free agents that left. But again, it's a very weird. It's a really weird team because they're always you will look at their roster and be like, who is on here other than Russell Wilson? But guess what? When you have Russell Wilson and the scheme that they run on defense and Pete Carroll as your coach, and again, Russell Wilson, you always have a chance with Russell Wilson, right? And I'm not just talking because he could run. He's got the great arm. He's a decent runner. He's elusive. And again, they just find ways of winning sometimes. And there's some games that they win that they probably shouldn't even be winning, but they win against teams that probably are immensely more talented, but they just find a way to get it done, and all that comes right back down to Russell Wilson. So Seattle, it all comes down to him. I honestly, Seattle, I don't know how often they draft in the first round, right? They always trade down and shit. it's weird because you'll always look at their team and be like, yeah, they do have a lot of like issues, don't they? And they still seem not to be overly eager to draft in the top of the like again because they're usually drafting towards the second half of the first round. So the difference between a first round pick at the like 28 and then like the 35th pick is not much. So when you're drafting at 24 and you trade down, or 26 and you trade down, you can accumulate a pick for 8 spots later and maybe get a fourth rounder. That's a big thing in their book, and it's given them a lot of extra players over the years, and it's given them a lot of leeway to kind of like take swings on guys in the draft and maybe take guys who maybe don't fit every team's roster. So they, I was saying before, they lost Jadeveon Clowney to free agency. Ezekiel Ancia is not quite sure if he's even still like alive. So they're gonna want to like they drafted a guy last year who was a pass rusher DN. So you're hoping he develops, but they I think the Irving pickup might help a little bit with the pass rush issues they were having last year. It doesn't sound like they're reuniting with Jadeveon Clowney again. I know they were kind of interested, but I don't think they were interested at his asking price. And now you're further and further down the line, and you're like, you know what? Let's wait till after next week, and then we talk. There's a couple of other guys out there. Everson Griffin's a name that's been thrown out there. I think that's a very interesting name. Again, this is another kind of player that they would target. Is a guy who's maybe a little bit older, but has still some skill to him. You're trying to take a flyer on a cheaper contract and build out the trenches. So Everson Griffin's a name. Michael Bennett's also a potential name for them to reunite with their former defensive lineman who has openly said he would return to Seattle and like to end his career in Seattle, but who we all know it's all about price with a lot of these people, and a lot of these teams. It's all, what can I get you for, right? They lost George Fant. That was a big cry fest, I bet. Jets are probably not going to be happy with him either. And they released Tedrick Thompson and Ed Dickson. Ed Dickson! I can't believe they released Ed Dickson with that kind of name. And Tedrick Thompson, who's played free safety for them okay. And I guess because they traded for safety last year during the season. So with Glover Quinn in the house, Tedrick Thompson's probably not getting a lot of play. They're like, you know what, we'll let you go ahead and find another team. He hasn't found another team yet. He'll probably find one eventually. So I'm not totally worried as far as what they've got. It seems like at least defensive backfield's a little bit better than they were last year. When you look at all the pieces around, right? With Quentin Dunbar in and Glover Quinn now going to be in for the rest of the season, for this full season. It's I'm still worried about the defensive line, but they always seem to they find like, hey, like you're they also seem to be a targeted destination for some teams, right? For some players, right? Like that was Jadeveon Clowney wanted to go to Seattle last year. Like that was one of his top 3 choices. Why? Because they have a methodology of encouraging players to be themselves. There's as opposed to the Patriot way, right? They got their own way, and it is, listen, we're gonna let you be you, but you got to show up. We want a bunch of alphas on the field, so you better show up and be an alpha, and we will let you be the alpha that you are. So, and I kind of always like that about Pete Carroll. I've always liked that about their team. I think that's made them a very, very unique, dynamic team. Very, I don't know. Like it's made them different than everybody else. It's made them, and sometimes it's given them a headache. And then they kind of refurbish and they refresh and they get rid of a couple of guys and they get some new guys in the room. And I just think it works. It's like we want to find guys who want to play their strengths. We want a bunch of leaders in the room, right? And whereas like you go to New England, they want a bunch of followers. They want everybody who's going to do what's best for the team. And it just shows that there's multiple opportunities, multiple methodologies to getting to be at least a semi-successful perennial team in the NFL. Seattle is consistently in the playoffs, and it shows why. They have a value system for what they value at defensive line, for what they value at cornerback, for what they value at safety, and how they play. And it just seems like, again, the offense has been the weird turn. It's been the part where they've been kind of changing it up every few years. One year they're running a spread system, then they're running a power run game, and then they're doing this, and then they're doing that. And you got Russell Wilson, so he kind of, like, when it comes down to everything falling apart, it's just get the ball to Russell Wilson and let him make the decision. And basically that's how it all ends up going anyway. So Seattle is, like I said, always a unique team. They could be in this draft. They could easily. I think they're going to trade out of the first round. I think everybody's probably thinking they're going to trade out of the first round because they do it almost every other year. Them and the Patriots. It seems like they're allergic to taking picks in the first round. But again, like I said before, it allows them to accumulate players, and it's how they were able to get guys like DK Metcalf and not worry about taking him at the end of the second round last year, where everybody else is kind of worried about him. It gives you the ability to take a good shot on a maybe more risky player that everybody else is freaking out about. So maybe they go, again, when you look at their needs, I could see, clearly they're addressing offensive line in free agency, but in a way that doesn't make me think that they're going to absolutely go offensive line in the draft. They pay Britt, so they got their center. It seems like they're just trying to find spot stars. It seems like they're trying to do what the Bills did last year, and they do every few years is just find guys to play in, stick here, play there. This guy does well. This guy does okay. We're just trying to be average, and going to try to run the ball and make everybody be honest about it. So I don't know. I like Seattle. I've always kind of liked Seattle as from what I've been able to learn from their team building. They're not the team of old because of what they used to be able to do was amazing, but they're still they're still perennial playoff contenders. They still, they are a threat against any team. It doesn't matter how good your defense is. They are a threat. So, and I'm talking to you, San Fran. Anyway, let's move on, right? We're on the West Coast at this point. We're talking about Seattle. Let's move a little bit south from Seattle. We're going to talk about the Raiders. No longer in Oakland, now going to be in Vegas. Although, who knows, right? Never know. But still, they've officially now relabeled as the Las Vegas Raiders. Get to talk about John Gruden and Mike Mayock, right? So, you can't talk about this team without talking about the Khalil Mack trade, right? And what did that net them? It net them, Jonathan Abram and was that the guy, or is that Josh Jacobs? Like, again, they trade a lot of guys. They got a lot of extra first-round picks between trading away Amari Cooper, trading away Khalil Mack. And honestly, I think it's worked out for them partially, but I don't know. In the long run, you got rid of a defensive end, and you got, Cleveland Farrell, I guess you kind of have to include in that because they took him at the top of the first round, and they were thinking this was going to be the guy to replace Khalil Mack. It's weird. It's like I like some of the moves that they do, right? And then I honestly, with the Raiders, I get very perplexed. But let's talk about some free agency moves with the Raiders, right? They did a lot of things, right? They signed Marcus Mariota, right? We talked about this at the free agency period. They signed Nick Kwiatkowski and Corey Littleton. Why? I actually think this was a good idea. Linebacker, paying the top end for linebacker, right, is like $10 million, $11 million, right? That didn't really cost them that much, and a lot less than what it cost the Jets to sign C.J. Mosley last year. McCagnon. It's like one of those guys that I don't get how you just let him keep going, right? And luckily he's not going anymore in the NFL. But back to the Raiders. It's actually a smart team-building idea to invest money in linebacker, depending on what your money's getting invested in, right? They don't have a lot of money invested on the defensive line, right? They've got picks. Well, they did spend a little bit of money. They signed Carl Nassib, former Cleveland Brown and Tampa Bay Buccaneer, and a defensive end, outside linebacker, pass rusher guy. And so they have a little bit of money tied up in the D-line, but not really a lot, right? So when you don't have a lot of money tied up in the defensive line, you got a lot of rookies that are usually in that defensive line rotation. O'Shane Zimenez played really well for them. Was that who they had, or is it the other guy? They have Cleveland Farrell. They have Maurice Hurst, who fell the 5th round to them a couple of years ago. I liked him coming out, and he's played very well for them. They got Damian Harrison, who's not a huge contract, but plays pretty well for them. So they got like a lot of these guys who, when you're not super invested on the defensive line, it lets you kind of play up the coverage aspects of the rest, right? Gives you some time to hit the quarterback, basically, right? Maybe we could throw some blitzes in there. So the roster building, it seems like they at least now have an idea. It didn't seem like they had a plan years ago, right? It just seemed like they were like, this is what we like, and we're going to go with this. And it didn't seem like there was a real plan. It didn't seem like they were using, like, smart roster construction. It's like my issue with Dave Gettleman and the Giants, right? So with John Gruden and Mike Mayock and the Oakland Raiders, this idea to spend a little bit at linebacker, especially when you don't have a lot invested at defensive line or corner, seems to be like actually a relatively bright move, because you're not spending like top end corner money, which is a lot more, or top end defensive line money, which is like $8 million more. So you might be saving a full player by getting something more out of it. It's just it's one of those things that I always like kind of being aware of, is like sometimes the strategy of what your positional spending is, and they went after 2 off the ball very good coverage linebackers, meaning they're probably not going to spend a high pick on a linebacker in this draft, which a lot of people were towards the end of the pegging them for one at the end of the first round. Now they don't need to; they have 2 really good ones. They signed safety Demarius Randall. They signed Eric Kush, formerly of the Browns. Just like, again, like Demarius Randall's a good, free safety player. Now they can keep LaMarcus Joyner in the slot. I don't know why you do that. He played better at free safety. So, honestly, I'd be playing Demarius Randall in the slot and playing LaMarcus Joyner at free safety. But either way, you have now a good safety rotation, and you're going to have the ability to a lot of good flexibility between both of those guys. Demarius Randall could also play corner. He has played corner in the past. He's never been really an amazing corner, but he's been a solid, average corner when he's played. You're probably not really happy that you have him playing corner. You'd probably prefer him at free safety because he's played pretty damn well on, occasions at safety. He's not always been good at safety, but he's been much better at safety, in my opinion, than he's been at corner. So, they also signed safety Jeff Heath, formerly of the Cowboys. He's more of a depth piece at safety. They spent a lot of weird money on safety this year, right? Now, again, Demarius Randall was a later signing, so I think they were trying to just take a spot hit on him. Be like, you know what? Let's see what we can get out of him. They also signed Malik Collins, again, another Cowboy. They signed 3 Cowboys, actually. Malik Collins, and they signed tight end Jason Witten, right? And they also have, we're talking before about safeties, they also have Jonathan Abrams on the roster, who they drafted last year, and then they also drafted Josh Jacobs last year in the first round. Trayvon Mullen came on kind of at the end of the year last year, so they still have like maybe a missing spot at corner. They at the other end of corner, they have a decent linebacking core, some interesting defensive linemen, but nobody that like makes you feel really happy about. But the real issue for this team has been offense. It's been offense the whole time. Like I've been burying the lead here, everybody. The offense is kind of it's been and I know they signed Marcus Mariota and Jason Witten, and that could be a very good combination, or it could be just whatever, right? Actually, well, this kind of brings up a good question. Now it sounds like Marcus Mariota might Ryan Tannehill, Derek Carr, which sounds like I'm using way too many guys' first names as a verb. So anyway, Marcus Mariota, former quarterback of the Tennessee Titans, former 2nd overall pick, is going to be backing up Derek Carr, and I can imagine Derek Carr is not going to have a huge leash. Apparently, like the Raiders said, listen, we're putting an opportunity on the field. We're giving ourselves an opportunity to take a guy like give us like Marcus Mariota the opportunity to pop up and be really good, and then maybe they could trade away Derek Carr next year to maybe the Patriots, right? If they see something good out of him. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of options out of it. But still, there's, Darren Waller was like their best pass catcher last year, right? Josh Jacobs played really well. Their offensive line came together. Colton Miller's developed pretty well. Trent Brown's played really well on the other side. So, and then they got Hudson, who's played very well for him since they signed him and stole him from the Kansas City Chiefs. I kind of like, and he's been there for quite a few years. I liked him being there for the longest time before, the new regime came in. So, offensive line looks good. Quarterback, at least you got now an interesting kind of competition sitting in that quarterback room. And now you got question mark really only at receiver, right? Well, this is a great receiver draft, right? They've got, you got a guy like Jerry Jeudy, right? I'm actually doing receiver tape, for tomorrow. The next time you will be seeing me, I'll be doing receivers, right? And there's a lot of guys at the top of this draft. Jerry Jeudy kind of reminds me a little bit of Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley-esque kind of player, and good route runner. I can't get really too deep into everybody who's available past these picks, but there's a lot of guys in this draft. If you're taking top 12, you have opportunities of taking guys like CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy. And keep in mind, they have 2 first-round picks this year too. No second-rounder and then 3 third-rounders. So they got quite a few picks to play around with. There is going to be a gap between their second first-round pick and then their first pick in the third round. So they might want to be careful, or they might want to trade down and even maybe accumulate a little bit more. But that top 12 pick, I think they're going to be targeting a really special player. I mentioned Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, again, another guy who you watch him, again, he's just a bully. He's an amazing-to-watch receiver. He's probably the guy who's got the highest ceiling in this draft class as far as receiver goes. A bully, a good route runner, good getting off the line of scrimmage, great ball tracker, good at contested catches. Like everything you want him to be good at, he's good at. So, the comp to him is a lot of times DeAndre Hopkins. He's a very interesting, unique, honestly amazing prospect to watch. And I think if they get either one of those 2 guys, they're going to be happy. There's potential to go for Ruggs, but honestly, if you have Tyrell Williams there, right, another guy who's a fast downfield receiver, hopefully he comes back and is healthy. They got Hunter Renfrow, who's played pretty well from the slot. I think what they should probably do is at least hope to get CeeDee Lamb. Hope is not an answer, but hope is actually just a thing you say. I hope to get this guy. I think the target should be CeeDee Lamb, if not Jerry Jeudy. Both those guys, top 12 pick, I would lock it in. That'd be perfect for what the Raiders need, and it really fits like basically the last big wart on their offense, right? It's really the big issue for this team. You can't say your team is not performing anymore because there's just too much available good talent at this point. So that's who I see them taking in the top of the first round. And then like you look towards the end of the first round, the talent drop off of elite premier talent is probably gone by 19, but there might be some options there at 19 as well. It depends on how things fall. It depends on how players kind of drop off, right? If they don't end up taking a receiver top 12, there's got to probably be a reason. Did they take a guy like, did Isaiah Simmons fall to 12? I doubt Okudah falls to 12, but there's always that Laramie Tunsil opportunity, right? You just never know who's going to fall. But even still, you go to 19, and like I said, there's probably 16 good players in this draft, maybe 15, but there's always a guy who gets reached for, right? So you get to 19, and is it a D tackle? Is it like a Javon Kinlaw or Derek Brown? Because I think they would love one of those guys. Just another interior presence to help push the pocket. More so from Kinlaw than I think from Derek Brown. I think corner, though, right? This draft, it's very interesting corner class, right? And it depends on what kind of scheme you want to run. There's a lot of different flavors of corner, and there's a lot of opportunity, right? There's Okudah, who's probably going to go in the top 10. There's Henderson, who a lot of people are pegging now as the 2 because he plays really well in man coverage. And there's Fulton, who a lot of time, for a good portion of time, people had as the number 2 corner in this draft class. And he was very much a more versatile, can fit both in man and zone, because they played a lot of everything over at LSU. So with these kind of options and opportunities kind of like I think the corner pick is going to come at 19 because I do think they need a corner. Now they might get to 19 and be like, well, there's nobody we truly like here. Maybe we trade down. Maybe like I was saying before, get an extra 4th round pick. I'm sure there's a lot of, or if they're looking to maybe again get a quarterback, right? Just because I think signing Marcus Mariota means that you're not happy with Carr, right? And you're looking to at least build up a competition in there. We get 3 third-round picks, and there's a lot of interesting day 2 quarterbacks in this draft. Jalen Hurst, Jake Fromm, and those are guys that, like, although Jake Fromm's probably the low end of Derek Carr. It's what you don't like out of Derek Carr, to be honest, is what you're getting from Jake Fromm. Is, kind of check down Charlie, not throwing it deep all the time, not getting it to where you want it to go. But I think Jake Fromm, there hadn't been a reason, because Jake Fromm played a lot better in 18 than he did in 19. I really would love to know why. Is it just that the guys he trusted left? Why was DeAndre Swift the only guy in that offense? So again, like there's gonna be some guys that they like at quarterback who might be there when they pick in the 3rd round, or maybe towards the end of the 2nd, maybe they trade up because they have 3 third-round picks. So when you have a lot of those options, I think there's a lot you can do with that for them. And then they also have, a very high 4th round pick as well. So the Raiders, I guess it has to be a question of, is this like a make it or break it thing for Gruden? Is it a make it or break it year for Carr? I think definitely for Carr. You have Mariota sitting there. And if you're really worried that much where you had to get Mariota, you might as well look into maybe getting another quarterback into that room. Now, I don't know if I'd take one with the 1st round pick, at least not where it sits. Because, like, I have enough options in that quarterback room, and you're not going to get a 3rd guy a lot of reps in camp, so especially with a shortened, condensed camp. But it might give you the opportunity to walk away from both of those guys and go into next year with maybe a guy who you feel a little bit more hopeful with. So I think one of those 3rd-round picks is a quarterback this year. The Raiders, I don't know. I liked Josh Jacobs. I like Darren Waller. Tyrell Williams showed if you're actually willing to throw the deep ball, you can get it to him. And it's a team that the holes are looking less holy, right? It doesn't look like they're going to be able to fix pass rush in this draft. It's just not a good pass rush draft. The one guy, like where they are in their 2nd pick, maybe AJ Epinesa or Caleb on Chason. I'm not comfortable with either of those guys. I'm really not. I'm not, again, like, I think that's when we get into when I do defensive line, you're going to hear my opinions on some of these guys, and I think that there's a good reason why you can look at these guys and go, okay, like, there's opportunity there, there's something, but I don't know how I feel. Like, I definitely don't feel great about them in the 1st round, but like I said, there's a lot of, like, what I would call, like, 2nd round guys who are probably going to go in the 1st, because it's a very middling, like, there's a lot of, like, guys who could probably go day 2 or day, like, 1st or 2nd and 3rd round grades. There's probably a bunch of true 1st round grades. Like I said before, there's probably about 15. So you're going to want to grab what you can as far as the 1st round grade guys go, but then also try to get opportunities to maybe take multiple swings up at bat. And that's really the Raiders, man. I think I was a little bit more impressed last year from Oakland, but still, I think they need to either get Derek Carr to put his foot on the pedal or get off the shit can, man. So I actually am doing 3 teams today, everybody. The 3rd team I'm doing, very awkward for me to do, because this team's in my division. I don't speak highly of them very often. I'm talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Don't have a 1st round pick. They have a compensatory they have a late 3rd round pick. I think it's either a compensatory pick. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this team, clearly. But with the Steelers, right? So no 1st round pick. Big Ben's coming back off of Tommy John surgery. He's I'm not quite sure what he's going to be when he comes back. They've got Mason Rudolph in the building, who I don't think played very well, and that guy Duck Hodges is in the building, and I thought he didn't kill him until he did kill him. So they're a weird team, right? They got a lot of first-round picks on that defense, right? They tagged Bud Dupree. They signed Eric Ebron in free agency, which is rare. They sign any free agents, but they did. They signed a free agent. They're not the Packers from like the Wolf era, or the Thompson era. They're not that bad, but they're still. I would still argue that they don't really overly pursue in free agency. They try to find like quick small deals, and they only do one or two guys. That being said, they released Mark Barron, so that's one guy who's not on their defense anymore. Not that he was really doing good for them on defense. They lost Javon Hargrave in free agency to the Philadelphia Eagles. They signed a bunch of XFL guys, right? In fact, Kevin Corbett said that the GM was like really leaning hard on the XFL. He wanted 3 extra rounds in this draft, which I just did not think was ever going to happen. But again, like he's like, listen, we're going to have to lean on the XFL because we're not going to get to really gauge a lot of these guys in the draft. I think that's an interesting take on it. I mean, you've had a lot of opportunity to watch film of these guys in college. I don't think the XFL was much better at being able to maybe get like a full idea or briefing on some of these guys. I guess it's just the opportunity to sign them now and not have to wait to the draft. But you're not getting to get them in the room anyway, so I don't know. It was an interesting choice of words. Ramon Foster retired, amazing right guard, elite right guard, was a stalwart of their offensive line. So you're losing a very key piece in that player. Like I said before, they franchised Bud Dupree. They trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's why they don't have a first-round pick this year. They're missing a third-rounder because it was part of their trade last year to the Broncos to get Devin Bush. So now you got a team that's kind of at a weird crossroads with their quarterback room. Can Ben Roethlisberger bounce back? Their offensive line is kind of in a weird situation right now. They don't have Mike Munchak anymore to be like that go offensive line coach, although they do believe in the guy they have now, which I totally understand. You have the guy in the building, you probably do believe in him. And I with the Steelers, it just seems like if I was a Steelers fan, I would be worried. I say this clearly as a not Steelers fan, but like if I'm a Steelers fan, I want to see moves at trying to get a quarterback in there, even if it's a second-round guy. But like again, it's kind of the question of what are you gonna do? Are you gonna try and get trade up and get Jordan Love, right? Do what the Ravens did and trade a second-round pick next year so you can move up into the first round and get Jordan Love? Is that gonna really make you that much better? Are you going to draft Jalen Hurts? Like, if you're not in the top of the first round, it's a very hard situation to try and get a really good player. And again, their receiving situation, so we never really got to see what life was like for Juju Smith-Schuster without Antonio Brown because he had Ben Roethlisberger gone by, like, week 2. And when you have Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges throwing you the ball and everybody's double-teaming you, they're not trusting you to go ahead and beat guys like the way Ben Roethlisberger trusted you to beat defensive backs. So, the Steelers are in a weird pickle, right? They lose a couple of defensive guys, they lose a couple of offensive guys. I like Juju Smith-Schuster. I gotta tell you, he's probably my favorite guy on all the Steelers. Juju Smith-Schuster is one of my favorite players. I loved the draft. When he came out in the draft, I loved the guy, and I thought that I just like him. I liked him coming out of USC. I'm a big fan of Juju, even though I'm not a Steelers fan. I love Juju Smith-Schuster, and I think he is. I don't think he is the level of talent of what Antonio Brown was, because I don't think a lot of receivers are. I think he is in the very good category receiver. I think he does need at least one running mate to help pull something away. So are they going to go receiver in this draft, especially in a deep receiver draft? Where, again, the GM said you could probably get a receiver in the 4th round or 5th round and get starters. And it's a weird thing. A guy who is so worried about like the evals and the medicals is saying you can get like a starter in the 4th or 5th round. That's a very like back and forth kind of feel on this draft. I'm not saying I disagree. I think there's a lot of good players in this draft. Receivers a very deep position in this draft. They might want to start looking at corner because, again, they probably still need to keep adding pieces to the back end of that defense. It's an interesting room in there. It's again, like their defense basically carried them through games last year. You know, are they going to look at running back? Like, again, James Conner did not stay healthy last year. You know, are you really going to believe in Benny Snell? Jalen Samuels is an interesting gadget guy, but I can't really say I'd really want him being like a leader of a backfield for an extended period of time. And then when you look at their receiver room, I like how Deontay Johnson played. Again, another really good guy that came out, you know, the last couple of years. Toledo product. James Washington. I'm still mixed on James Washington. I still haven't seen enough out of him in the NFL to make me feel like I would definitely want to, you know, buy in on his production. But I don't know. It's a weird situation. I know for me, again, like I do like the tight end room because Vance McDonald, Eric Ebron, or at least an intriguing coupling. But it almost kind of makes me go, like, I don't want anything to do with that tight end room in fantasy football, right? I got to start talking about fantasy once we start getting into the bulk of this, but I felt like I'd have to keep on resetting myself, get from free agency to the draft. So we're going to get into we're going to get into the fantasy football, at least like kind of as a reactionary thing at the end of this. But that's one of the things that I think is a good point is all it makes me want to do is avoid this tight end room when we get into fantasy drafts next year, if there even is a fantasy football next year. I can definitely see them taking a quarterback. I could see them taking a running back. Like I said before, it's a deep draft. You might have a couple of opportunities at some good players in this draft. And I mean, I feel like their receiving core is okay, but they're just missing, like, again, another oomph guy. And I don't think you're going to get that where they're drafting. The thing is, when they trade away a lot of those picks, they missed opportunity to get some real impact players. They better hope they can at least get something in this draft. But I honestly, again, like, I think here's the thing. Let me speak highly of this team. I think Tomlin is an amazing coach. I think Tomlin is probably, you know, the jury's out on Stefanski because he's just coming in, but you can't say anything about him right now. So he's clearly, but he's got to be in the same division as John Harbaugh, who is, again, another great head coach. You know, Tomlin is, but I like Tomlin a lot, and I think he's just done so well as a head coach. He's a leader among men. I'm not like that is of these teams. These are all like Seattle. Okay, so Seattle and Pittsburgh are really well coached teams. I'm not entirely sure about Oakland. So that's my assessment of it. Looking forward to 2020. All three of these teams, I think, are potential, you know, playoff berths next year because Big Ben can come back and be better than ever. You never know with the Tommy John, right? We've never really seen that in the NFL of recent, like of any quarterback really having to come back from that recently. Oakland, again, they just keep building up, and it seems like they are getting the pieces that they want. So I hopefully, you know, we saw you play okay last year. Hopefully going into next year, you will have all the pieces together and you will make a playoff run. And Seattle is always a perennial playoff contender. So with that, I bid you adieu. If you want to follow the podcast, follow it at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch. Like what you do with that thing that is your hand when you close it and put it in somebody's face, right? If you're watching this on YouTube, like it, subscribe, leave a comment. And again, I think next week is when I'm going to announce this new project I'm working on. And I don't know if people will like it or not. I'll maybe put out a little promo. It is a very different thing than what I'm doing right now. So keep an eye out. It's going to be called Punk Law 101. Very confusing name. It has more to do with what I do in my real life. Follow it on Instagram and Twitter as well. And on on iTunes, leave a review, screenshot the review, send it to us, right? Send it to us. Say, hey, we went ahead and reviewed, and preferably 5 stars, right? Anyway, thank you for tuning in. We are doing a live stream on draft night. It'll be me and one of my compatriots who you've seen on here quite a few times. We will be watching the draft, and we will be commenting. And come in, watch, hang out, and tune in, and see you next week.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.